The reinforcements are coming. We've got great injury updates for Trey Murphy, CJ McCollum, and Matt Ryan. I'll tell you why this significantly elevates the Pelicans' ceiling. Plus, are the Pelicans advancing or out of the in-season tournament? It's Wednesday's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Wednesday, a game day for the New Orleans Pelicans. I want to touch on one thing with this 76ers game tonight. We'll hit on it in the third segment, but we got great injury updates. Good news, finally, on Trey Murphy, CJ McCollum, Matt Ryan. You should be really excited about this because this is the exact fix the Pelicans need. I'll explain why in today's show. Plus, I want to look at how it's going to impact Herb Jones as well. So, of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are the Number One Pelicans podcast, coming to y'all Monday through Fridays, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team, the X's and O's on-court stuff, injury updates like in today's show, trade rumors, all of that. We got you covered here at Locked On Pelicans. So let's get into just the very good news. Look, I expect CJ McCollum to play. He was upgraded to questionable. I think we're going to end up seeing him play in this game tonight against the Philadelphia 76ers. Last update I have was that he was going to go through shoot-around, go through warm-ups. If that goes well, he's going to return. He's going to play. Perfect. They need the three-point shooting. Matt Ryan and Trey Murphy, and this is a little bit of a surprise, but not that much of a surprise, both upgraded. The fact that Trey Murphy is not listed as out, he's listed as doubtful, same for Matt Ryan. So about 25% chance they play. You know, questionable is 50%, probable 75% is kind of the general rule of thumb with those designations. This means there's a chance he could play. That's really cool. He hasn't played it all this year. And we expected Trey Murphy to take a big leap this season, potentially be in the running for most improved player, though I don't think he will be in that anymore. I don't think he would have necessarily been in that anyway. But more importantly, he shoots the ball well, right? This team needs more three-point shooting. They are struggling in that regard. This is something that I've kind of been hammering here if you're an everydayer of the show. I also forgot to mention, become an everydayer of a Locked On Pelicans listen Monday through Friday. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. But Trey Murphy is such an important player for the Pelicans here. And we've said the three-point shooting is going to be a problem for the Pelicans this season. And it ended up leading, I think, basically, as I said in yesterday's show, directly to the loss against the Utah Jazz. Could have cost them against the Clippers, could have cost them in that second game against the Sacramento Kings as well. None of that is good. Trey Murphy last season on over 7 attempts per game shot 41% from three. Sorry, not over 7 attempts per game. What were his numbers? 6.3 attempts per game. Shot 40.6%. That's really, really good. He's a flamethrower from deep. He can also get to the rim and score as he was in the dunk contest last year. You need some three-point shooting, guys that are going to make opponents pay for walling off Zion Williamson, a la the Utah Jazz. A dude that can do that, Trey Murphy. Another guy that can do that, CJ McCollum. And I've been saying CJ should go right back into the starting lineup, and I expect him, when he really is back to form, to be in the starting lineup. I don't know if that'll be tonight necessarily. They'll probably have him on a slight minutes restriction, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's eventually back in there and they keep going forward with him as the starter. He's not going to be the sixth man off the bench. We talked about it in yesterday's show of why. You need the shooting out there with Zion Williamson. Certainly, even if he were not to start, he would be closing games. But he should also be starting games. He should be closing games. And then in between all of that, he should be running with the second unit and leading that group because we've seen really good things with that so far this year. With Matt Ryan, it just gives them another shooter, another option to go with. And so when all of these guys are healthy, one, I don't know if Matt Ryan will be in the rotation, but certainly Trey Murphy is going to be getting over 30 minutes per game. And that's going to push other guys out. I think Najee, because Willie Green loves him, will continue to get minutes. But I do wonder with CJ back if you'll see as many minutes for Jose Alvarado, who's already playing limited minutes, but he has an impact just as like a hustle guy, other things like that. Matt Ryan's going to definitely lose some minutes, I think, too. Dyson's minutes might go down slightly as well. They need more shooters out there on the court. I also do think that if you really want to run a switching defensive scheme that puts more shooters out there on the court, a lineup featuring CJ McCollum, Herb Jones, Brandon Ingram, Trey Murphy, and then Zion Williamson could work. We've seen this team, and we'll get into Herb Jones in the next segment here because I do think that's important to touch on, that having Trey Murphy, having CJ back makes Herb even more valuable and more playable because at times his offense hasn't been great and teams don't respect him. But that doesn't matter when you have other threats out there on the court. But if you run that lineup, they've been running Herb, guarding some fives, mainly to pre-switch to go into then a pick and roll and switch on to who you want. But he also can defend some of those guys. And it unlocks those Zion at the 5 lineups. Zion at the 5 is more about just playing small, but you don't have someone to guard centers. We've seen Trey do it at times. He did it in preseason of his rookie year. He handled Evan Mobley really well, which was pretty impressive. If he can grow into that role a little bit, if Herb can do some of that, those Zion at the 5 lineups become much more playable and much more effective because you have a way to actually not be just getting beat down low, beat defensively, while also still giving you enough rebounding to be competitive with everything. So I'm excited to see what those lineups could look like, what they're going to be capable of doing. CJ is a shooter, Trey is a shooter, that works. BI is a scorer, Zion's a scorer, and then you have Herb as your defender. And again, we'll talk on Herb and those lineups a little bit more coming up in the next segment. But the Pelicans are not doing well with 3-point shooting. It's creating spacing issues. This year, they are taking 31 attempts per game. It's 25th in the league. They're basically hitting the same number as last year that we all said was like completely unacceptable and they needed to do more of. Part of that's been injuries. No CJ, that's over 8 attempts per game that you're not getting. No Trey Murphy, that's over 6 attempts per game. Probably going to be more this season that you're not getting. So those numbers are going to be lower, but still. These numbers need to be up, and taking 22 3-pointers against the Utah Jazz certainly shows the problem that they've had with the lack of shooting. Here are the reinforcements. This is what they need. If they can't figure it out with these 2 guys back, if they don't work well as a team overall with these 2 guys back, that's a significant concern. And that kind of then colors maybe what you should be doing at the trade deadline. So coming up next, let's dive into Herb Jones a little bit more. I'd said it was maybe an open question. Should you start him? Should you start Trey Murphy? I'm back on start Herb. I'll talk about why and explain it coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I want to bring up and talk to you about eBay Motors because our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. So whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you the players that are guaranteed to fit your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us in this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. If you want some former Celtics, they got you covered, including one current Celtic. Al Horford, he's only played one more game this week, but with Porzingis out, Horford's going to get a bump in his production. Gordon Hayward, if he was dropped in your league, he should be grabbed now that LaMelo Ball is out with an ankle injury. And Jaden Ivey of the Pistons, his level of play has improved since joining the starting lineup. And with the Pistons going nowhere, they're going to continue to invest in these young guys. So he's going to get minutes. He's going to get shots. So Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is here to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. I work on all of my cars, including an old 1976 Corvette that I want to keep running. It requires constant supply of new parts. I get them all from eBay Motors. When I work on my Jeep, same thing. Because with eBay Motors, I know the part's going to fit. I don't take a part out, start to put in the new one and realize it's slightly off or it's not the OEM manufactured part. Then you have to take that out. Your car doesn't run. It's a disaster. And with over 122 million parts for your vehicle, you can make sure it stays running. You can also just upgrade it, brake kits, make it look cooler with LED lights, new roof rack, new bumpers, whatever it needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your vehicle running over at ebaymotors.com. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday for y'all, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team, the Number One Pelicans podcast, even when I'm on the road recording for you, because we're not going to miss a show. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, and become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday. Or if you listen 2 days a week, listen 3 days a week. Go from 1 to 2. A little bit of an increase goes a long way in supporting the show, keeping it free and 5 days a week for y'all. So let's get into Herb Jones for a minute here. You know, it's been an open question of, do you start him or do you start Trey Murphy? We were going to do a whole show on that before the season started. It was arguably like the number one question that I was asked for a period of time. And then Trey Murphy tore his meniscus, and that kind of rendered it all moot. So, okay, we don't need to worry about it anymore. Well, now it might start to be an open question again, as the Pelicans are struggling with their three-point shooting. They're not really generating the space they need, and that final possession against the Utah Jazz was really emblematic of all of that. But with CJ McCollum back, with the offense being elevated mainly by the play of Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram, look, the reason they kind of took off the past couple of weeks, 2 weeks, is not because Dyson was in the starting lineup. He's doing a great job defensively with the deflections, with the steals, all of that. But Zion and BI just played better. If you remember when Will Guillory, if you're an everydayer, was on a couple of weeks ago, he said, those two haven't been good and they just need to get better. And when they do, this team will be in a very, very good position. Well, he was certainly correct. They started playing better. They started winning games. And sometimes it's really as simple as that. We often overthink basketball, but when your best players play well, you tend to win games. Don't always take that as fact. I need a job here, certainly, and you come to me for deeper analysis than that. But that's honestly like part of it. Like, it really can be as simple as that, and those two guys are playing better. If they continue to play at the level that they're playing and they get a little bit more spacing, a little bit more shooting, which CJ is going to provide, perfect. This team can do some very, very good things. If you keep using Jonas Valanciunas in a more efficient way, dribble handoffs, which also creates space, gets Zion going downhill, that can also counterbalance some of the lack of shooting and keep you having offensive threats out there on the court. All of this is to say, this probably means you can keep your best defender in Herb Jones out there with the starting lineup, because he's been playing unbelievable defense this year. He's been really good, y'all. You know this. I don't need to tell you this. He needs to be making an all defensive team. He needs to be like the fringe candidate for Defensive Player of the Year, without a doubt. The only issue with him the past couple games is just getting in foul trouble in the first half, but he's just been unbelievably good for a while, I think, and I've loved what we've seen from him. I don't want to take him out of the starting lineup. Having someone that's a disruptor like that can get the ball, can help you get in transition, but more than that, also elevates the play of those around him. When he's going kind of gangbusters on the defensive side of the ball, it forces guys like Zion, like BI to, try harder on that side of the ball. Some of the past games, the past one, Zion was bad defensively against the Jazz, but we've seen some actual decent defensive games from him. So I want to continue to see those good defensive games from him. And when Herb is like putting him to shame on that side of the ball, it definitely seems like it motivates him to keep him playing harder and at a higher level. Trey in the shooting is definitely going to be important, but if you keep doing what you're going to be doing, just bring him in as your first sub. Whether it's you take CJ or Herb out, you can do that. And, maybe you, or Jonas out, right? And then kind of run what could be a small ball, Warriors-esque death lineup for the Pelicans here. I think that's the lineup that we all want to see. Zion, BI, CJ, Trey have played 19 total minutes together in their time in New Orleans, which is disappointing. But I think we're finally going to be able to see, some of the potential of that lineup. And I do think it's going to be pretty good. So I'm excited to see this, but I don't want to see Trey starting yet, or maybe even at all this season. I think there's an argument to be made for it. But with CJ spacing the court well, with the elevated play of Zion and BI, particularly if Brandon Ingram is shooting more threes and being a court spacer, Herb is doing a really good job of attacking the basket, being more decisive, picking his spots and scoring that way. That's been good, I think. The three-point shooting hasn't been there, but that's ticked up a little bit. But I want the defense. This team does want to get stops. They do want to get out in transition and run, and they need someone that's that defensive stopper, and that is Herb Jones. When he can disrupt the flow of an opponent's offense like that, this Pelicans team can very much take advantage of it. Look at what they did to dismantle the Dallas Mavericks by using Herb in very, very smart ways. Again, putting him on centers to start the game so that when the center comes and sets a screen for, say, Luka Doncic, all of a sudden you've now switched Herb onto Luka instead of starting Herb on Luka and then having him switch onto the big because that's what your defensive scheme demands. It's really smart stuff that's very simple, and it's creating good results for the Pels. So I want to see more of that from them, and I want to see if Herb can get those steals, get those blocks up, get this team in transition and running where CJ now can shoot. Zion can score. BI can score. This team can be very lethal, and they've done a very good job of ball movement somewhat recently, which I think mitigates a little bit some of the lack of offense at times from Herb Jones. But he can also handle the ball well. You're seeing him get assists. You're seeing him make plays. And if he can guard centers, you can run small ball lineups too. I think this has potential to be very good for the Pelicans. We'll see how it all plays out and if they eventually will need to start Trey. But that's more if Zion and BI can't keep up their recent level of offensive play, or if CJ starts to struggle. But if CJ's taking 8 threes per game and hitting them, at 38%, which is what he's shooting this season, they're going to be fine. You have someone that can burn the defense. If you had, CJ McCollum on that final shot against the Utah Jazz, that's an entirely different thing because there's a credible shooter out there beyond just Jordan Hawkins. And that's what the Pelicans are missing right now. They get that guy back, it means you can play a non-shooter a little bit more than you could, say, right now. So right now I'm on team start Herb Jones for the foreseeable future. Maybe we'll change my mind, but I'm not really sure. Let me know in the comments down below on YouTube what you think. Should they start Herb Jones? Should they start Trey Murphy when Trey is back? I don't know if Trey's going to play in this game. Maybe he'll play on Friday. Maybe it'll be the second night of the back-to-back against the Chicago Bulls. We'll see. But certainly him just getting listed on the injury report instead of out, that's a real good thing. I'm excited. This team's finally coming together. If they fix the three-point shooting issue, spacing gets better, Zion plays better, everything gets better. Really simple as that. All right, coming up next, in-season tournament results. The Pelicans advancing. They're 3-1. Maybe, maybe not. I'll break it down for you coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about FanDuel because as the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. It's $150 if your team wins. You want to bet against the Saints because you don't trust them right now? Because I don't. Well, then Saints lose, but you win an extra $150 in bonus bets. It's not a bad way if the Saints are going to go out and lose and play garbage like they did the other day. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. I love how easy the app is to use, and it lets you find all of the betting options, spreads, player props, over-unders, the same game parlays. Get a bigger payout when you hit one of those. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get in on the action this NFL season, this NBA season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL and the official sportsbook of Locked On. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast. You want to support the channel, become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday, whether it's in-season tournament talk, which we're about to get to right now because, look, I love this thing. I love what we're seeing from it. It's going to be so much fun. Whether it's trade targets, rumors, whatever it is, we got you covered here at Locked On Pelicans. So subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Pelicans didn't play on Tuesday night, and I was absolutely riveted to NBA League Pass watching a couple of games that genuinely mattered for New Orleans because of the in-season tournament. Look, I mainly watch Pels games. I watch a ton of other NBA too. But on a Tuesday night where I could be doing other things and I got to be up late for Locked On NBA, maybe I don't need to pay attention to certain games. Yet I was because of the tournament. The tournament is designed to get us to care more about the regular season, whether it's the team you follow, the Pels here, or other teams. But I watched most of the Dallas Mavericks beating the Houston Rockets because if the Pelicans wanted to advance at all to the quarterfinals of the in-season tournament, they needed Dallas to beat the Rockets. And it was a riveting game that went down to the wire, essentially. And then the late game, right, that didn't end till midnight, something like that, Central Time, you had the Warriors taking on the Kings. If the Warriors won by 28 or more points, 27 or more points, they would host the Pelicans in the quarterfinals. The Pelicans would be on the road. If the Warriors won by less than 27 points, or whatever the number was, the Pels would host the Warriors. But also, if the Warriors didn't win by at least 12, that means the Kings would advance. Or if the Kings won outright, which they did. And that meant the Pelicans were going to be on the road. So you had one game. 3 possible outcomes could impact the New Orleans Pelicans. So I watched the entirety of that game that the Kings won 124-123, which was a great game. The NBA wants us to care more about the regular season. The in-season tournament is a big success. This has been fun. The games have been close. The point differential, which I was initially skeptical about, mattered. The Warriors were up 24 points in this game, and I'm rooting for them to win by less than what the target number was because it impacted the Pelicans, and I had a vested interest, a rooting interest in this. And it made me watch just an awesome NBA game, stay up late. I'm going to be a little bit tired on Wednesday, but it was totally okay to see all of that. I think that's the point of the in-season tournament. It's what's made the in-season tournament so much fun and why it's really, truly working. So this has been great. A big success, I think, for the NBA so far this season. So now, the quarterfinals are set, and I kind of love everything about this. You have Suns at Lakers as the 1 and the 4 seed. In the East, you have the Bucks taking on the New York Knicks. Then in the East, you have the Pacers, Celtics, and then finally the 2 seed Kings with the Pelicans on the road. This game is going to be on Monday the 4th. So Suns at Lakers, Pelicans at Kings, Knicks at Bucks, Celtics at Pacers. It's the Elite 8 according to Woj of the NBA. This is great. Look at these games and they're all intriguing for a variety of reasons. You know, the Bucks have maybe the easiest one, but the Knicks are playing well. Celtics at Pacers is the darling of the NBA in the Indiana Pacers and Tyrese Halliburton, who's gone on record saying he wants to win the in-season tournament and is going to go all out and do everything he can. Had an amazing game the other night. So they're going up against the most complete team. Can Tyrese Halliburton basically will the Pacers to a victory there over arguably the most complete team in the league and maybe the team that's the favorite to win the in-season tournament? Then you have Suns at Lakers, Kevin Durant versus LeBron James in a knockout game, even if it's also technically a regular season game. All of these games are regular season games right now. The only game that won't be considered a regular season game is the championship game, December 9th, which is in Vegas. Then you have the Kings and the Pelicans. And look, you look at Suns and Lakers, right? Bucks, Celtics. 4 of the 8 teams here are kind of like blue bloods of the NBA. If any of those 4 teams won, the championship, you go like, oh, okay, I get it, right? Pacers are a fun team. Knicks are a big name franchise that should be in there. Then you have the Kings and Pelicans who kind of feel like the 2 odd teams out, maybe along with the Pacers, right? But one of them is guaranteed to make the semifinals of this in Las Vegas and play a marquee game. And it feels like a Cinderella team in March Madness, kind of crashing the tournament, beating a blue blood and going far. This is awesome. It matters to the players. You can see they very clearly do want to win. It matters to the coaches because there's money at stake. The courts have been fun. It's different. There's just a different kind of energy. And for all the people who don't like the in-season tournament, 1, you're wrong. 2, when you go to one of these games with the different court, people who are maybe more casual fans, right? Look, you don't need to be staying up late, worrying, wondering, watching for point differential, but it's cool if you want to do it. If you're a diehard NBA basketball nerd, kind of like myself, you get to do that and geek out with others, and it's just great to be part of that community. So this is fun. You just go there, though. The games feel different. The atmosphere feels different because the courts are different, and it just feels like something. And I love it. This has been so much fun and one of my favorite things that the NBA has put in for a while. Again, all of these games were pretty much good in some way. You were watching them for a reason because point differential mattered. Going into the final games of this tournament, right? Like teams knew what their target number was, how many points they had to win, so they needed to push. Like the Cavs needed to win by a certain amount, so they won 128-105, right? You had teams blowing out others. The Celtics needed point differential to help them. 124-97 over the Bulls. You know, the Kings just needed to win or not lose by much. So you had this scenario potentially where, you know, they could have been like down, it was 12 points, I think, that if they lost by less than 12, they could move on. So you could have had a situation where the Warriors were up 13 or something like that. The Kings have the ball in the final possession of the game. They've already lost, but they're gunning for a bucket and it matters right until the very end. That's so cool. This is so much fun, I think, and it's working. So now I'm excited for Kings Pelicans. Ideal matchup for the Pelicans, right? Having just beaten the Kings twice, it seems like the Kings don't match up well with New Orleans. We'll certainly give you a strong preview for this game on Monday when they play. This is just fun, y'all. I really love the in-season tournament. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree or disagree. But the Pelicans advance. They're in the quarterfinals. Seeing if they can maybe win some sort of hardware, silverware, whatever you want to call it this season would be kind of cool. Even if it's the in-season tournament. I've been enjoying this. This is a lot of fun, and clearly the players are taking it seriously. So this title actually does mean something if you end up winning it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below on YouTube. And that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. Thank you all so much for listening. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NolaJake on Twitter. Didn't even get to the 76ers talk that I wanted to get to. It had to do with free throw disparity, all that. Keep an eye on Joel Embiid getting the line, but Zion not getting to the line. We'll probably talk about that in tomorrow's show as we recap the game. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NolaJake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all tomorrow.